Fantastic to be here in Singapore, everyone. I thank you for coming and making it on time after lunch. I know it's a great selection they've got out there, but you've got an even greater panel to come and watch in the next 40 minutes that we're here. So in this panel, we've got a great lineup of builders, solution providers, and investors. And we're going to be talking about decentralized intelligence, the vision for universal AI. In blockchain and DLT, the term decentralized is always used, but its true meaning is multifaceted, right? Decentralization can manifest in a number of ways in terms of the number of participants, the using a technology, the level of control, the allocation of compute power, the allocation of treasury, the number of developers that are there as well. There are many measures and degrees of decentralization within the industry. Now, when we talk about decentralization, we're applying it to artificial intelligence, or just intelligence itself. What does this mean? How is it being implemented? And how is it going to lead to universal AI? And that's what we're going to be covering in this panel. We're going to cover what is decentralized intelligence and why it's important for universal AI. We're going to be exploring some real-world applications, listening to what our creators have built and how their products are being used and what they're investing in. And finally, we're going to discuss some of the challenges that they're facing about bringing decentralized intelligence to the market and what's in store for the future. So let me start off with asking the panel, one by one, to just briefly introduce themselves and try and define what does decentralized intelligence and universal AI mean to you. Jansen, if I start with you.
Right, thanks, Nikhil. Hi everyone, Jansen here, CEO and co-founder of Virtuous Protocol. We are building the largest decentralized library of AI agents for all gaming and entertainment use cases. So to answer your question, I would like to draw parallels to what the web is. Right? Web 1 is effectively a single-direction information flow. Right? Web 2, it's multi-directional information flow, and Web 3 is then the ownership of information and verification of information. Right? So it's the same kind of parallel we can draw to decentralization or AI creation. So the first is you have centralized AI, which is that single-directional flow of intelligence. And decentralization can come in the form, the second archetype could come in the form of a many-to-many interaction of people coordinating actions in bringing this intelligence up. But the third archetype of it could be an environment where it's not just many people contributing to an intelligence, but many people contributing that intelligence that can be then verified and can be then co-owned. So I think that's a bit of a definition I would bring to space.
Fantastic. Michael?
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm Michael, CEO and co-founder of ZeroG, but ZeroG is OG, so I just wanted to make that clear around the name, ZeroG.ai. So basically, what we're building is the fastest modular AI chain, and we're sitting right in the middle of the AI stack. We're basically building data infrastructure for putting AI fully on-chain, and so that we can actually do things like on-chain model training and so on. So in order to do that, first of all, we need a way to store the data. So we've built an ultra-fast data storage network. And on top of that, we then built something called a data availability network. And the data availability piece, not only does it help with storage and permanent storage, but also with throughput. In order to do things like on-chain model training, we need 50 gigabytes per second or more in throughput, depending on how big those models are. Right now, best-in-class systems do 1 to 10 megabytes per second in Ethereum. So many orders of magnitude off, and so we've basically architected a system that gets us to 50 gigabytes plus in data throughput. And at the same time, we also need to lower costs enough so that it actually makes sense from an economic standpoint. And so our system is about 100x less than competing systems as well. So enough about ZeroG. Universal AI, the way I look at it is ubiquitous AI, just to keep it interesting, because I actually agree with what you said as well. Ubiquitous AI, meaning every facet of our lives is going to be influenced by AI, whether we like it or not, in the next 5 to 20 years, if you will. And it'll go from individual use cases, let's say an AI agent ordering pizza for us or booking a hotel, And at the other end of the spectrum, societal use cases, AI agents actually running full systems, whether it's manufacturing, logistics, transportation type of systems. And I was actually presenting on this yesterday. My postulation there is that for societal use cases, there's no future for AI without blockchain. We need the provenance, we need the verification, we need the visibility to actually understand how models were trained, what data went into them, how they were cleaned, what decisions they're making in real time, so that we have confidence that these agents are fully aligned with our interests at the societal level. So that's my quick definition.
Thanks, Michael. Jake?
Awesome. My name is Jake Brookman. I'm the founder and CEO of Coin Fund, which is a blockchain-focused investment firm based in New York, Miami, and Boston since 2015. We've been, since 2020, investing in the intersection of AI and Web3. In terms of universal AI, on a previous panel, I talked about how Web3 is really a toolkit for opening and democratizing the pipeline that creates AI models and products. And that's really kind of a developer perspective. For universal AI, maybe we should take more of a consumer perspective and say, it should be pretty clear that for AI to become ubiquitous and universal, it cannot come from a small number of centralized monolithic models, or at least we shouldn't want to live in a world where that is true. And there's so many different reasons for this. There's cultural reasons, the way that people in different countries and localities want to query LLMs, for example, is very, very different and based on their cultural context. We're also seeing a proliferation of LLMs, whether OpenAI likes that or not. Just like as, back in 2013, people were saying Bitcoin was going to be the only blockchain. We've seen actually a proliferation of different technologies, architectures, and applications around many, many different kinds of blockchains to date. And I think the same thing is going to happen with LLMs and other AI models. Now, from a consumer perspective, I think one of the key things that Web3 will bring to the table is essentially data self-sovereignty, right? If you boil down, what is the value of Web3 that it's really trying to bring to market, it's the idea that large corporations like Google and Facebook and OpenAI, et cetera, shouldn't own all of our data. Data should be owned by users, monetized by them, and they should ultimately be the deciders of how it is used. Web3 will facilitate that and will enable kind of personal agents that protect the privacy and sovereignty of that data for users.
Thanks, Jake. Humayun?
Right. Humayun Sheikh, I think, well, a lot of people have already told many things. I'm a founder and CEO of Fetch AI. Fetch AI is building the infrastructure which actually can make decentralized AI happen, which is an agentic network which enables you to granularize AIs and then enables them to communicate and interact with each other. In terms of decentralization, what I think decentralization is where multiple stakeholders can interact with each other. And if you look at AI, there are different ways of looking at AI. You have to have some centralized big models, but you also need to have granular emergent AI. And I think the whole decentralized ledger technology lends itself to building that solution. All the other things have already been covered many times now, so I think I'm going to pause here. Thank you.
Well, can I follow up with one bit? One thing that's been talked about already, and just a level set, is this concept of an autonomous agent or an AI agent. Can you explain a little bit, what is an AI agent?
There are multiple definitions. It's the whole field is evolving, right? So AI agent can be a bot which can communicate with you, but that's a very text-based, knowledge-based agent. Then you have autonomous agent which can actually do a transaction or do an action based on something. And that's what I refer to in Fetch's terms, the autonomous agent. And what the difference is that you have knowledge-based agents and you have transactional agents. And really, to get the best out of AI, you need to combine the two. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. So we've talked a little bit about what is decentralized AI, what is universal AI. What about why? Why do we need decentralized AI? Jake, you were talking a little bit about, it's important to have universal AI. Are we ready for everyone to have access to these powerful AI models?
I mean, I think that, there's a famous quote, which is, the future is already here, but it's not uniformly distributed. I think a lot of us here move through a kind of a technology world where, we sort of seem to think that everyone has AI. But I can tell you that a couple of weeks ago, I was driving through, in the US, through South Carolina, which, if you don't know, is a very rural state. And I can tell you that AI is not evenly distributed into South Carolina. We have a long way to go for AI to actually become universal and accessible to people. I think part of that is costs. Part of that is just education. Part of it is also data self-sovereignty and availability of technology. And so there's actually like a long way to go, despite what we might think on this stage, to get there.
Sure. And when we talk about universal AI and we talk about needing to decentralize intelligence as well, in order for progress to be made, isn't progress made faster and more efficiently when things are centralized, though? Michael, have you got any thoughts on this?
So one quick answer I'll give to that is if you look at the entirety of the compute power of the Bitcoin network and you compare it to Google, I think, based on an article I read recently, is 1%. And so that just highlights that if you have the right incentive mechanisms, if you have the right ways of thinking about a problem, if the right way of bringing a community together, as a community, we can be much stronger than one centralized company. And also, if you have some type of oligopoly type of setup with a handful of companies controlling quote-unquote AI, there's also a moral hazard argument that could happen. Imagine, 50% of the world economy, all of a sudden, all of that revenue belongs to a handful of companies. Well, those companies essentially become like the new nation states and could essentially also abuse that type of power. How do we check that type of power? And so decentralized systems are a check essentially on that because they put the ownership away from the data that we're actually producing. These centralized entities are utilizing the data that we're producing for their own purposes and monetization. In a decentralized context, the data belongs to us. We get compensated. And so overall, I think a decentralized ecosystem can be significantly more productive with the right economic incentive system, with the right community behind it.
Cool. I'm going to ask the same question to Hermione, because your background also comes from DeepMind, right? Yeah. So that was quite a centralized, would you say, system for generating?
Very centralized.
Yeah.
But I'll take a slightly different position to what you're just saying. I think people don't really care about their data because if you look at the evidence is kind of proving that point. People will give the data away as long as there is a service they can have. And I think even if we're trying to build, so let me just rewind a little bit, which we don't need one big universal AI. It will be distributed into smaller chunks of AI. When you say, farmland where there is nothing to do with AI, they actually use AI already in terms of putting, in terms of looking after their farm or when they want to seed it. AI is already there. It's just not visible. What has happened with OpenAI's ChatGPT is that everybody now sees it and knows it and wants to interact with this big AI. But AI is going to be granular. It already is. We already use it on your phone, in your car, on your washing machine. It's already decentralized effectively because you have multiple stakeholders connecting and providing information. The only difference I would say is how do you take that approach and how do you start interacting for the user and make it more efficient for the user rather than make it more efficient for the centralized entity. And I think that's where we're going to see the paradigm shift, because ultimately, your agents or your AIs are going to look after you and not look after the big company which runs them. So on that front, I think I don't see this as a big AI thing. I don't see it as a universal AI thing. I think it's going to be, before we even know it, it's going to permeate our lives, and we're going to start interacting with AI, which we already do today. I mean, you speak to voice bots, and you speak to your phone, and you do that already.
Well, that's a fantastic perspective. You're saying that, AI is already decentralized in some ways, in some dimensions, right? And then that brings me to kind of the last question of this particular part, which is, well, do we need the blockchain in order to decentralize artificial intelligence? What do you think, Jansen?
Honestly, you don't, right? You don't, because there are platforms out there that already tries to organize a cohort of people building intelligence together. I mean, example is like open platforms like Hugging Face, right? But the beauty about blockchain is that you can do it better. I think what Michael mentioned, right? I think the keyword that he used was the ability to create incentives for people to react to it. And if you think, this connects to the previous question, right? Where honestly, if you compare any progress of a centralized organization versus a decentralized organization, anyone here who has participated in a DAO or any kind of decentralized ecosystems will know it's a mess, right? It's very hard to coordinate people because everyone has different objectives and desires, right? But what's important is that if you can actually dangle an incentive that has what we call like an instant gratification capability, it's like why all of us take a 9-to-5 job, because there's that instant carrot of like, hey, I might hate my job, but there's this pay, right? So that same thinking can coordinate a bunch of people working for a corporate who might even hate their jobs. It's the same kind of thinking that might happen in decentralized space, right? Where if you can enable an incentive right enough, instant enough, you can then start coordinating a multitude of people to work towards a single objective. So blockchain and crypto economics help with that. It makes it a more efficient system versus a standard democratized AI platform.
So importantly, the incentive mechanism is kind of a vital feature there for utilizing the blockchain itself. Okay, great. So we've talked now about what, we've talked about why. Let's talk about how, right? So this is a question I'm going to ask to the kind of the builders we have on the panel itself. Starting from you, Humayun, can you share kind of some of the real-world applications that Fetch.ai is doing that is decentralizing AI and indeed providing universal AI?
Yeah, so let's put AI aside for a second. And I think the best way to look at it is, what is the use case? And if I look at a use case, especially when you talk about decentralized use case, you have to think about a use case where big centralized entities can't profit from as much as they would like to because the cost of running it is too high. So I would kind of point out gig economy as a very interesting kind of example of this, where we could see AI permeate from. So gig economy is where individuals work and you reward the individuals. So it has all the components, the reward mechanism, which was mentioned. It also has the component that if you look at organizing gig economy, you have multiple stakeholders, and you don't really get the sense that they can collaborate without some mechanism. You have AIs which are distributed because every individual has its own AI, which needs to interact with somebody else's AI. So all the components are there. And if you take gig economy, and I'll give you centralized examples, which is like Uber, Airbnb, these are all gig economy kind of big players. But what you could easily do with AI, which is more granular AI, I'm not talking about a centralized AI, is that you can actually collaborate all those efforts and actually deliver the same quality of service using a very decentralized approach. So what we are building in Fetch is all the tools which enable you to deliver a solution for the gig economy like building a decentralized Uber or a decentralized Airbnb or any of those kind of things where multiple stakeholders, multiple individuals want to interact with each other, but the organization without a decentralized orchestration layer, which is the DLT, is not there. So you can't get the AIs to interact without that. So I hope that kind of gives you a fair idea.
Thanks, Mike. Michael, have you got any real-world use cases at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the storage side, basically we can offer costs up to 80% lower than AWS, for example, because we're using storage devices that are already in data centers and are unused. And with that, you can basically then also have built-in disaster recovery and also security, because one of the things we do, as opposed to just putting something into an S3 bucket, we actually erasure code the data, so you can actually lose a big part of the data and still recover it. And on top of that, you can also do replications, and you just pay a little bit extra for more replications over time. So your data is much more safe. And so with that, you can then have things like censorship resistance built in. If AWS, for some reason, doesn't like your data, they can easily say, like, OK, we need to kick you out. Or the AWS server that holds your data fails all of a sudden, and good luck, you didn't have a backup. So very specific use cases there. So if you're building an AI model, for example, like Pond is building a large graph model on top of that, you don't want to lose any of that training data because it's super, super valuable. So that's one example. Then on the data availability layer, because we now have such a large data throughput pipeline, new application spaces are open to us. So some of those in the DeFi sense would be things like on-chain order books or high-frequency DeFi. You can then also start doing more interesting cryptographic things at scale, so things like FHE or like fully homomorphic encryption, high-frequency DePIN type of applications as well. And then, finally, obviously, anything on-chain with AI, eventually leading up to on-chain model training, will now also be possible. There's many other technical limitations to that. You have to figure out asynchronous training. You have to figure out batch training. There's lots to do on that end, but those are some of the kind of use cases that we're seeing.
Great.
Yeah.
And Jansen?
I think the keyword here is skill. And I think what a decentralized environment and blockchain allowed us to do was the ability to incentivize people at scale. And I think the example that we like to create is that, so for context, what we do is we create different AI agents for gaming entertainment purposes, right? So it could be, let's say, an IP-related mirror. It could be like a John Wick, a Taylor Swift, or our own IPs, or even a functional agent. It could be like a sales agent, or a game engine agent, or a TikTok influencer, right? The creation of all of these assets, these are multi-model. They can talk, they can act, they can have actions, they can have objectives and autonomously execute those objectives, right? For those to happen and to be built by a very centralized company, you need to hire tons and tons of people, right? And I think if you just compare, an example of a use case that we tend to do, it's gaming NPCs. And the biggest competitor we likely have in the Web2 space is InWorld. I'm not sure if any of the guys are here, but InWorld, if you take a look at a website, the library is very limited, right? Because it's in-house, they employ a bunch of engineers or data trainers to build up their library. For us, it gets easier to handle it at scale because we drop a token incentive into the ecosystem. We build a proof of intelligence mechanism that allows different people to contribute different parts of this agent, and then a curation or validation layer, right? So now, basically, a bunch of people, it creates a gig economy effect where a bunch of people can actually earn by contributing different data sets, different models, and even validating or curating these data sets. So suddenly now my workforce becomes 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, right? Versus being able to just employ 100 people or 200 people in a company. So I think that keyword skill, it's probably one of the key use cases.
And what's the most popular AI agent you've got on your platform?
Most popular. It's actually our own functional agent. It's an agent that allows any kind of AI characters within a game environment to recognize the gaming space and to execute autonomous action in the gaming space. You guys can take a look. I think there's a booth out there to help you guys visualize. But yeah, that's the one that I think excites people the most.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. And fueling all of this, of course, is investment, right? And Jake, we're lucky to have you on the panel. When you're thinking about investing in decentralized AI or decentralized intelligence to fuel universal AI. What's the thesis you've got in your mind? How much is decentralization important to you? And how do you measure whether something is decentralized enough for your investment case?
I mean, essentially, we are investing in the pipeline that produces AI models. And that pipeline starts with a bunch of compute. You might know that there's a lot of bottlenecks in the availability of compute, and everyone's building a lot of data centers right now. There's sort of a countervailing force which allows you to aggregate compute using decentralized networks. It's also about training models in a decentralized way and potentially using sort of heterogeneous commodity hardware. And it's also about building decentralized networks for inference. It's about building marketplaces for data that can be used to fine-tune models or to augment models. And I kind of see what we're doing is investing in the decentralized infrastructure that opens and democratizes that pipeline, using Web3 primitives.
And what do you use to kind of measure this decentralization?
I mean, essentially, we look at whether these products are using kind of Web3 approaches. So, for example, take data labeling, for instance. How is Web3 being potentially used in data labeling? Data labeling is very much a kind of human endeavor where you have to source kind of a supply side of humans that help to manually label data. Now, if you add economic incentives through cryptocurrency into that picture, you might create a new business model. You might create efficiencies or sort of lower latency in how you can create this product. And so, in general at CoinFund, when we think about investing, in Web3, we are looking for ways that blockchains, decentralization, and Web3 technologies are creating efficiencies that Web2 doesn't have, right? We're looking for kind of competitive advantages.
Cool. So now we've talked about the current state, some real-world use cases, some impact that's going on, how investors are thinking about the particular area as well. Let's talk about some of the challenges in the future to kind of finish off this last part. Everything in this industry is changing really fast. And how can we ensure that with this very quick evolution that's coming along, that things are safe and secure? Is the industry policing themselves, or are they able to police themselves, or do regulators need to step in? Michael, what do you think about this?
If you listen to some of the kind of top alignment people from OpenAI, I don't think they know. They're just running a lot of experiments, basically, to figure that question out. But what I do know is that if you have a full provenance trail in terms of what data was used to train a particular model, what weights were used, what kind of the decisions are being made in a real-time basis, and you have that full visibility, that you have a much better shot at aligning these models with human interests. And then on top of that, having the immutability of the ledger is also quite important, because at some point, if you have beyond human models, what they can do is they can say, hey, let's say it's an agent that's picking up trash in a particular region or something like that. And it basically says, I've picked up all this trash, I've done all of this work, here are all the centralized database entries to prove it, and here are all the pictures I've generated to prove it. But in reality, nothing happened. So what's happening is that this agent is cheating and found out a way to not expend any resources to derive some type of benefit. And so in a decentralized context, that's, we want to put these agents in a perspective where they can't cheat, because you can't change the records. If it didn't happen, then we will definitely see that it didn't happen. And so if it didn't happen, then you can have some type of AI alignment nodes, for example, to say, okay, this agent is starting to cheat. We need to start either enforce some type of slashing conditions from an economic setting, or take away some of the incentives that we gave those models in the first place. Or have policing AI agents that then say, okay, some condition is triggered. We need to start swapping out the model, or taking this model offline, or this agent offline. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things to explore. Even how do you even align an agent that's beyond human intelligence? Do you have beyond human intelligence agents talk with each other and then have a human decide on what they came up with. Those are some really, really fascinating questions to get into. But I think the immutability, the economic security argument, and the full visibility of blockchain offers a really, really interesting solution in that space.
And Jake, when you're investing as well, are you thinking about this is top of mind for you, safety and security? How do you also look at regulatory risk here?
I think safety and security and kind of the risks of any new technology have to be top of mind. I just think that people right now vary widely on how to address those risks. So when I think about how we're building AI in the mainstream today, we're having large, hierarchical, centralized organizations build AI as private goods. It means you have to pay to access this good, the revenue goes to this organization, and the organization controls the governance. One of the reasons that I'm in the blockchain space for as long as I've been in this space is because I believe that using blockchain technologies, we can create really effective public goods. These are goods that operate at cost for everyone's benefit and whose governance is democratic. To me, safety of AI it's a complex and nuanced issue, but to me, like one of the most important themes in achieving that safety is open source, transparency, and actually the proliferation of AI models that are open. And the reason that I think that is when I think about like what does it mean to certify that like a model is safe? It means that you have some kind of verifier that tells you so, right? And at some point, that verifier, like today, those verifiers might be humans, but in the future, they very well might be AI models themselves. And so you see this dynamic, like where AI models are actually mediating and counterbalancing the safety of other models. Like for example, if someone uses ChatGPT to like write their essay and cheat on their exam, you can actually use an AI to try to determine whether that essay was generated by AI, right? So you see this dynamic kind of over and over, and I think for that reason, like a world where there's a lot of diverse models that can mediate each other is actually a net safer world. And that world is achieved through, again, a proliferation of models that is enabled by sort of an open operating system of how they're created.
Cool. Humayun, you're a veteran of this space, right? Fetch AI was already here decentralizing AI 5 years ago before, the terms become something that's in vogue at the moment. What have you seen as kind of the changes over that period? And what do you see as the kind of changes coming in the next 5 to 10 years? I know you guys are merging at the moment with SingularityNet and Ocean Protocol, and this is a kind of big piece of news.
I think putting the merger aside, we'll come back to that. What we are seeing is obviously the uptake of AI just by every individual. I think everybody's aware of it. Because everybody is aware of it, you can see the adoption is going to exponentially increase, and we're already seeing that. People are not scared of using AI. I think that negative connotation, although it's still here, it's actually getting reduced because you can interact with it and you can speak to the AI, and it's much more entertaining effectively. So I think what OpenAI and ChatGPT did was really lowered the barrier of interaction with AI. And that's opening up the whole space for everybody to interact. So I'm very optimistic of what AI and the whole space is going to do. I think explainable AI, as we have seen Mistral's new model, that's solving the problem. I don't feel the regulators should come in just yet because I think they will stifle the growth. I think where the regulator needs to come in is the implementation, the actual action delivery. And once we see that, then we'll start seeing better use cases, and I think that's what the space needs at the moment. Rather than just getting overly fascinated by technology, we need to create use cases which actually people want to use, and then use AI in that. And I think that's what the space is going to see over the next 2 to 5 years.
But talking about the merger as well,
Yeah.
are you, I mean, ahead of the curve with consolidating? Is this something you think is going to be coming?
Yes, I would say that, but it's a very natural progression. It's an evolution of the space, because if you look at the technology stacks we were building, they're all very complementary. And it doesn't, whereas we love decentralization, and that's what we're talking about, it is a lot less efficient. And even in the decentralized space, even while you're building this technology, creating a loosely connected, more integrated vertical tech stack is much more efficient. So if we are going to compete and provide an alternative to big tech, we have to be efficient. And this is one step towards that improvement on the efficiency. And putting all the 3 projects, and hopefully more, would just bring that kind of ability for us as a decentralized space to compete with centralized space.
Yeah. Well, it is in fact a centralization in a sense, right? That you're coming. The industry always goes from wave to wave, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jansen, is what I wanted to ask you. What do you think, I mean, is going to be the most crucial thing to ensure that, you know, when we come back again to this conference in, you know, hopefully every year, but if we're sitting here in 5 years' time, that we're not still talking about decentralized AI and still talking as if, you know, we don't all have autonomous agents helping us do everything that we're doing.
Yeah, it will evolve. And honestly, I think like any industry right now, we are in a very R&D stages. That's why you hear of all these fundamental discussions and stuff. What's next is then the growth stages, right? Like if you look at any industry, any businesses, what's next is then, oh, you have stock markets coming out and people investing in stocks and businesses. And it'll be the same case. You'll see this term Agent Fi coming out, where people would treat agents as businesses. Instead of now just investing in a Tesla or Nvidia stock, you can start investing in agents directly, because these guys are achieving things and achieving productivity metrics for you. So I got a feeling that's something that's going to be very exciting coming, and probably we'll be discussing that, like, I don't know, next year.
Hands up if you're using autonomous agents in your life right now.
Well, we got a few.
A few, yeah. So we hope this is going to only increase in the future, right? Okay, so we're nearly finished. Final thoughts from the panel. One last kind of quick thought around decentralized intelligence and universal AI, starting from you, Humayun.
It's coming. We need to adapt it. We need to certainly try and interact with it. And I think the main thing I'd say here is use cases. We need real use cases.
Jake?
I mean, to that point, I think in the blockchain space broadly, we need real use cases. And AI is actually one of these consumer proximate technologies that is poised to bring a lot of use to blockchains in the near future. So if you're building a project on the intersection of AI and Web3, we'd love to chat with you at CoinFund.
Michael?
I would say any new technology, whether it's AI or in the past it was, let's say, the atomic energy, really still depends on human consciousness around it. Because we can weaponize this technology, or we can fulfill the promise of AI, where some of my professors say in 2 generations' time, we don't have to work for a living anymore. Do we want to live in a world of abundance, or do we want to live in a world of destruction? And it's really up to us to guide AI into a setting where it's really for human benefit. And so that's why our mission is to make AI public good, because we believe by doing so will then lead to more abundance and prosperity.
Jansen, last words?
So in the spirit of Balaji's famous one-liners that he started this conference with, let me add the 11th statement to it, right? So AI connects nodes of intelligence. Crypto connects nodes of human contribution. That would be my statement.
And that's a great way to end it. Thank you very much for your thoughts, panel. Thank you.
Thank you.